Yo, 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 welcome to another episode of Roundball Ramble. I am your host, Corbin Ford. You can follow me on Twitter at Corbin NBA. This is a hoop ball. Oops, it's not. It's a Sports Ethos presentation. Why do I keep forgetting? Sports Ethos presentation. So check out Sports Ethos on Twitter at Sports Ethos. Online, just as simple, sportsethos.com. Really simple to get all of your content that you're looking for, not only in the world of fantasy sports, not only in the world of basketball, but also baseball now, football as well, college sports. It's all there. And by the way, while you're there, take a moment to follow Ethos Fantasy BK on Twitter. It's the single most dominant basketball and fantasy news feed on earth. Get all your NBA news in one handy Twitter feed. It's fast in the competition and it provides more analysis too. Again, that's at Ethos Fantasy BK on Twitter. Make sure you follow now. On Roundball Ramble, you know we talk about basketball, and I'm pumped, of course, as always, to be joined by my friend, host of Duncan Dynasty, movie extraordinaire, basketball savant, Russell Westbrook hater, but it's all good because he's one of my best friends, Garrett Bugay. Garrett, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing really well. It's a fun time of the year for both movies because we're getting sort of those end of the year Oscar releases coming out here in the near future. And yeah, basketball wise, it's also really fun because we've got the All-Star game stuff coming as well as the trade deadline. So yeah, I'm doing great.
That is good to hear, sir. That is good to hear. Yeah, I'm okay. I mean, I was just talking to you before we recorded. By the time y'all listen to this, you'll find out. 'Cause I'm about to give you the date. We're recording this on the late night into the early morning of the 6th. But we're on the 5th right now of February. The Lakers beat the Knicks in a hard-fought, and I repeat, hard-fought game. Where they're down 21, clawed back and won the game in a game that Kendrick Nunn was actually questionable for, but didn't play. But anyways, everything here is just it's peachy. As a Laker fan, we are still under 500 and championship expectations exist, and we are just under a week until the trade deadline. But we are all good. Because we're gonna talk, of course, Garrett, about all-star snubs and then some trade scuttlebutt. We're going to break down that Clippers-Blazers trade again into more detail. I know by the time I listen to this, I've already talked about Honor Rude, but it was such an annoying trade. Plus, Garrett, from more of a Blazers perspective, can add more because I honestly have nothing further to add to that. So let's start with the all-star snubs, though, Garrett. The all-star team was announced, both starters and reserves by now, so we know where we stand on that. I guess we can kind of run through the teams. Not the teams, but the roster, the pool, if you will. You have Team Durant, who is injured and will be getting an injury replacement. You also have Team LeBron. Out of the pool of players, you have Giannis Antetokounmpo, DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid, and Trae Young. Those are your starters. Steph Curry, LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, John Morant, and Andrew Wiggins are your starters for the West. As far as the East pool of reserves, you have Jimmy Butler, Darius Garland, James Harden, Zach LaVine, Chris Middleton, Jason Tatum, and Fred VanVleet. On the West side, you have Devin Booker, Luka Doncic, Rudy Gobert, Draymond Green, Donovan Mitchell, Chris Paul, and Karl Anthony Towns. So throwing this over to you, Garrett, we've seen the teams, we see the rosters. There will be injury replacements for Kevin Durant, as well as I'm trying to remember who the other player that's not going to be playing in it is.
Draymond
Green. Thank you. Draymond Green on the West. So we'll have two replacements for these teams. But as always, whenever there's some nominees, there's so many, usually great candidates to make the All-Star team that are on the outside looking in. Let's go into kind of your list of All-Star snubs. I'm intrigued.
Okay, so I've got two guys in the East that I think should have gotten in, and I actually have the guys that I would pick that they should actually have replaced on the roster as well. And then I also have an injury replacement in the East, and then I have one guy in the West that I think should have made it over actually a starter in the West. You probably know who I'm referring to.
I think I do.
And then, I've got another guy that I'll have as the Draymond Green injury replacement. So we'll start with the East. And the first snub that I have, and this guy has been on an absolute tear in the last few weeks. I think Pascal Siakam is an all-star.
Really?
I mean,
Okay.
he's putting up about 21 points per game, 8.6 rebounds, 5.1 assists, career high assist percentage, shooting 68% at the rim, 44% in the short mid range, 35% from three. He's also done, a pretty decent job on the defensive glass. The Raptors are doing a better job on that side of things when Siakam is on the court. He's also got a career high in free throw rate and PER. And, when you watch the Raptors, obviously they're a team that on the defensive end is flying around and wreaking havoc. And Siakam has just been absolutely excellent on that end. And, he's carrying with a relatively high usage, the half court offense for the Raptors. Toronto's got, they're 6 points better in the half court when Siakam's on the floor, and 9.8 points better overall per 100 possessions with Siakam on the floor. So yeah, he's really done it more in the last 20 or so games. He's been on a tear, but I think that's gotten him a deserving spot on this team.
Wow. I mean, listen, I've seen a few Pascal Siakam games recently, and he has been playing just amazingly well. So I will give credit when credit is due there for sure. You know what? I think that he's someone that maybe do you think that he came on late in the season, or not later in the season, but just kind of picked up steam as we went along? Because I know if you look at the Raptors for the most part of the year, the big story was Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fred VanVleet is a deserving guy, and again, I'll mention with all my snubs who I would have them replace. And for Siakam, I think he should replace James Harden on this team.
Wow. Okay. No. Wow. I'm not surprised, but I am surprised because James Harden's counting stats look decent, per usual, but I do think that he's been up and down, a lot more volatile for sure. What's kind of your knock on Harden for this year? Is it just that?
I mean, 33% from three and 52% at the rim, both really low for his norm. I mean, he still has a decent efficiency just because he's still a master at getting to the free throw line and converting there. But pretty much every other area of his offensive game has suffered. And, he's certainly not helping the Brooklyn Nets defense. And the Nets are 2.4 points worse per 100 possessions with James Harden on the floor. And, obviously that's in part because, you've got Kevin Durant a lot of times playing in the minutes when James Harden sits. But, he's just not having the kind of monumental impact that he has had in years past. And he also just has, kind of been going through the motions, it seems, this season.
I think so as well. He seems like someone who I think his attitude is largely kind of it bleeds into how he plays, And I think this year he's obviously expressed frustration, of course, with not how he's been utilized, more so in terms of him expecting to be, equal parts and kind of waltz into a title alongside Kevin Durant and James Harden. I mean, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And that hasn't been the case. He had to shoulder a lot more of a load. I don't think he came into camp in the best of shape. Hamstring issues, again, have been a problem for him. It's been a lot that he's had to deal with. And I think that's, it's kind of borne out this season where he's had a lot of ugly games. Yes, he had some inspired games. I think that Lakers game was really largely Patty Mills, but he also played a part in that. So that was a factor as well. But I don't know. It's one of those things where you look back and he has all-star caliber numbers, but he's not worthy of an all-star. I look at him very much like I look at Anthony Davis on the West for different reasons, though.
Yeah, and Harden got off to a really rough start to begin the year and then started to, pick up the pace a little bit. But yeah, he's just never found that stretch of consistency that you would expect. And yeah, to get back to your earlier question as to Siakam, he missed the first 9 or 10 games of the regular season coming back from that shoulder injury. And then even his first, I'd say 5 to 10 games from the injury, you've got to get acclimated. You've got to get your conditioning back and a little bit of that rust off. He hadn't played in quite some time. But yeah, as I said, in the last 25 games, he's been absolutely terrific. And, when you compare watching Siakam and watching James Harden just from an effort perspective, it's no contest.
I agree. And it's night and day. And it's sad that it is that Harden is so checked out. But yeah, you're right. It's not even a comparison between the two. And I agree with you completely, actually. I think that if you're going to put Pascal Siakam in, especially given the way that the impact he's had in Toronto since he has been playing more regular, you have to take someone out, and James Harden is a worthy candidate to be replaced. So totally with you on that.
I got one more thing in regards to that. Like, you know, people aren't really noticing too much, but the Raptors are now 5 games over 500. And, you know, the Nets have been on a little bit of a slide. So it's not a, you know, if you are the type that wants to pick their all-stars based on team success, the separation between the Nets and Raptors isn't as significant as it was a few weeks ago.
Which is something that's something to consider. Definitely. You're looking at the Nets' recent slide. They're 2-8 in their last 10. They've had a slump since Kevin Durant went down, while the Raptors are surging. It evens out. When you look at it that way, you make more of an argument in Siakam's favor.
All right, you ready for my next East snub?
I am definitely ready. Garrett, let's hit it.
All right, Drew Holiday.
Yes. Okay, and I have an idea who you want to take out. Let's hear that.
His own teammate, Chris Middleton.
All right, go into it, man. I was thinking the exact same thing.
So what's funny is Chris Middleton is known as the mid-range maestro, right? And
yeah.
Middleton as early as as recent as 2 seasons ago was shooting 51% from the mid-range. He's now down to 44% from mid-range this season. Drew Holiday shooting 51% from the mid-range. Holiday also at 39% from 3. I think last year there was a clear delineation, whereas Middleton was the number 2 offensive option behind Giannis and Holiday was the clear number 3. They kind of have become sort of a co-number 2. Holiday's usage has gone up from 24.1% to 27%. Middleton's is still right in that 27 to 28% range. So given that Holiday has been, pretty close to as efficient and as, high a volume as Middleton, and you factor in Holiday as the vastly superior defender, I think Holiday has been the Bucks' second best player.
You know what? I would agree with you. I think that he's been more consistent. He stepped up in bigger games. The defensive impact that he's had has been a lot more reliable than Middleton. That's not to say Middleton's had a bad year per se. He's just not exactly had a year as good as Drew Holiday has. And I think you already kind of bore out some of the numbers that give some credence to that. But also, I mean, it passes the eye test as well.
Yeah, he's been terrific, and the Bucks have been much better. They're 11.1 points better with Holiday on the floor, and surprisingly here, Corbin, 9.7 of that is on the offensive end. So the Bucks have been vastly superior offensively when Holiday's playing, and that just goes to show you that those numbers that I referenced of Holiday's effectiveness in the mid-range and from 3, and he's always been a guard that does a really good job of getting to the rim with high frequency. The Bucks have just been a better offensive team when Holiday plays.
Wow. I mean, there it is. I wasn't even aware of the impact on that. I just thought that personally, while Chris Middleton's played okay, I just didn't think he was deserving of it. I mean, you look at the numbers and on their head, 25-5 will always get you in that conversation. You already have the experience of having been a 3-time All-Star, and you think, hey, one of the better teams in the East, defending champions. It just feels like Chris Middleton kind of rode more of his performance last season into this year's All-Star game.
Yeah, and I don't want to suggest that Middleton is like way off All-Star level. I think it's borderline. And even the guy I've got as the potential injury replacement for KD, I would say is more borderline. You want to hear who that is?
Yes, let's hear it.
So I got Jarrett Allen as the injury replacement for Kevin Durant.
Jarrett Allen. Okay, go into. I don't disagree. I like that, but I do want to get your take on it. I know it's pretty fleshed out.
Well, and I'll say this. I mentioned that Holiday would replace Middleton and Siakam would replace Harden. I wouldn't be opposed to Harden, Middleton, or Allen getting this injury replacement role. I think they all have pretty similar cases. Allen, is a complementary offensive piece. He's a play finisher, although he has added a little bit more of the post game this year. But shooting 77% at the rim, He's done a good job protecting the basket along with Evan Mobley. Although, I think it's hard at times to differentiate which one of those guys is really the reason the Cavs defense is good as it is. Although I tend to lean Mobley.
Okay.
But one of the things that's really interesting about both of them is that they both block shots, and they do so without fouling. Jarrett Allen at just a 2.2% foul rate, which is in the 98th percentile. And also another thing Allen does that really benefits the Cavs, since their offense isn't that explosive, is he gets on the offensive glass, 11.5% offensive rebound rate. So you factor in his ability to finish at the rim, both with those short jump hooks and also with the vertical spacing and dunking in lobs, combined with the offensive rebounding, and then on the defensive end protecting the rim. I think he's got a case for sure, and the Cavs team, I think, probably deserves two guys given how good they've been this year.
How close would you have Evan Mobley?
Yeah, so I actually do think he's pretty close.
Okay.
I think you could make an argument that this season Jarrett Allen has been a better player, but I would argue Mobley has been the more valuable player, if that makes sense.
That does. Yeah. Like you can do, one is obviously better, but one does the little things that are integral to keeping the team kind of going.
Well, and Mobley's ability to play the four alongside Allen, and his ability to then play some five as well. Just that versatility that Allen doesn't have, I think, is very critical. And I think Mobley has been a top 10 defensive player in the NBA this season. So I think that alone puts him in the conversation for an all-star selection. But I probably have him just a little bit short. But the guy I have as my West snub is actually in a similar vein to Mobley, where a large portion of his impact comes on the defensive end.
Really? Okay. Well, so let's get more on that.
Okay. So I spoiled this earlier, but this player is going to replace Andrew Wiggins on the All-Star roster.
Yes. In fact, before we even do that, let me get your take on Wiggins. We kind of talked a little bit about this. So, I know, but for the listeners, I do want to hear your take on Andrew Wiggins, the All-Star in general. Is it worthy? Is it not? Like, let's hear it all.
He's not worthy. He's having his best season of his career. He's been, a quality starting wing in the NBA, which is no small feat. That's impressive to be that. Mm-hmm. And he's been a contributor on an excellent basketball team. So this isn't, me saying that Andrew Wiggins is terrible at basketball or anything, but when you're talking about a guy being an all-star caliber player, we're talking about him being around a top 30, 35 player in the mm-hmm. NBA. And Wiggins is just not that. He's still, limited in some ways offensively. He's not the greatest of passers in the world. Most of his shot creation is in isolation on the post or driving in. He has improved that three-point shot, but that's another thing that kind of makes me a little skittish when you're talking about a guy being deserving of an all-star. Like, if Wiggins misses one or two threes every couple of games more than he has, and he's shooting, say, 37 or 38% from three instead of, around 42, would people look at his resume as an all-star completely differently?
Yeah, I think they would. I mean, if you look at Andrew Wiggins' numbers from this year to last year, they're better, but like only marginally. You already broke down some of the numbers and how, the swing up in three-point shooting really kind of made the difference here. But like in its entirety, it's not that different.
Right. And yeah, like there's nothing wrong with being a quality starting wing. Like every team needs those guys. And he's put himself like probably, almost assuredly within like the top 70 players in the league. Like I think he fits that criteria. But yeah, if you're trying to say he's a top 30 guy, I just think that's a bridge too far.
No, I agree entirely. So with that being said, we've kind of understood why Andrew Wiggins isn't that player. Let's get to your replacement for him.
Jaren Jackson Jr.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, okay. Wow, that is okay. Tell me why. I am intrigued by this one.
So, I mean, again, I would say it's a similar case for him as like Evan Mobley for the Cavs, except, and people have said, oh, well, Jaren Jackson Jr. really struggling offensively. He's only shooting 32% from three. But when you factor in what Memphis had offensively last year at the 4 with Kyle Anderson, Jaren Jackson Jr. shooting 32% from three on high volume is helping their offense, and it's helping John Morant have the best offensive season of his career. He's having a positive impact offensively, even though, yes, his shooting numbers are a little disappointing. And then when you look at the defensive side of the ball, he's been terrific. The Grizzlies are 4.9 points better per 100 possessions defensively with Jackson on the floor, and opponents shoot 7.2% worse at the rim with Jackson Jr. on the court. And, the other thing that I think is so impressive, for the first couple of weeks of the season, the Grizzlies were dead last defensively, right?
Yeah.
And everyone was wondering what the heck is going on. And then John Morant went down with an injury, and then they started going on a win streak, in large part because Jackson Jr. started playing really well. And the Grizzlies are now all the way up to 9th in defensive rating. And I think, obviously the Grizzlies have multiple good defensive players on that roster. But again, going back to like Evan Mobley, I think being the most valuable defensive player on Cleveland, I think Jaren Jackson Jr. fits that bill as the most valuable defensive piece for Memphis.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I like it. I think that, that's weird. I like it. I just, and you gave a very good reason as to why Jaren Jackson should be. He's not as integral, but nearly as integral as John Morant has been to the success of the Memphis Grizzlies. But would you put that over someone like a Anthony Edwards or an Anthony Davis? I feel like I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask anyway.
I mean, I think it's close. Anthony Davis is actually, spoiler, he's my injury replacement for Draymond Green.
Oh wow, I jumped the gun.
That's okay, but yeah, it's close. So one other thing I had in my notes about Jackson Jr. and sort of the impact that he has. Again, having a 4 or a 5 that is spacing so often also benefits your transition defense, because he's out on the perimeter. He's in position to get back and to be a body in the path of opponents trying to get to the rim on fast breaks, and that shows in the statistics. Opponents have 1.7 fewer transition opportunities per 100 possessions with Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor. So, I talked about the half court offensive impact with his floor spacing, even despite the 3-point shooting. I talked about his half court defensive impact with the shot blocking, and then even his transition defense impact, I think, just from his positioning on the offensive end is also boosting that Grizzlies defense.
That is true. I mean, you make a good point as far as the type of impact he's having specifically on the defensive end. And yeah, I've seen him. He's kind of curtailed his fouling a little bit. I think we both agree on that. He's still having issues on that end, but like his availability, I think, is a much bigger deal.
Yeah, I mean, it was a disaster the first year or two where he was just he's seemingly fouling out within like 20 minutes on the floor, and yeah, he's gotten better. He still has, as you said, he still has room to improve there, but it's gotten to a point where yes, he's able to stay on the floor for significant minutes and maintain that defensive impact.
All right, so I mean, that's a solid one as well. You haven't missed so far. I've agreed to pretty much all of these. So I guess with that, we gotta go to the injury replacements. You already mentioned one, Anthony Davis. Do you want to kind of go into that a little further before we go into Kevin Durant's injury replacement?
Well, I did the Jared Allen was the Kevin Durant.
Oh, I'm getting mixed up. I'm getting mixed up over here. I thought he was a snub again. He's in. Jared Allen is in. And then we do have Anthony Davis. These last two guys you mentioned are definitely in here.
Yeah, so Anthony Davis is the Draymond Green replacement. And I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm just still kind of focusing on East-West, even though, the All-Star draft has made that, non-existent. But so Davis, he's still, I think he's still having a pretty good impact defensively, albeit it hasn't been his best defensive season, but the numbers support that Davis is still having an impact at the rim and making a difference there. He's still freakishly long and athletic. And then on the offensive end, like for the most part, he's been what we've seen from Anthony Davis in the past. He's 74% at the rim, 40% from mid-range. It's just one category that he's really struggling with, which is the three-point shot, shooting just 17% from three. So, you know, similar to Andrew Wiggins, where like I don't want to give him too much credit for potentially an outlier shooting season. I don't want to demote Anthony Davis too much for an outlier three-point shooting season in the opposite direction.
I see what you mean. You don't want to skew one like too far one way or the other.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I agree. I mean, Anthony Davis for me is a weird one. I don't think he's that stunning. He missed a large chunk of the season. He's looking so much better now, and I could definitely see him as an injury replacement now because he has been on an absolute tear over the last couple of games. Like just doing great stuff, piling up monster double doubles. You want it, he has it the whole nine. But like, let's not forget, he was a large reason for the Lakers slump to begin the season. Like, yes, injuries were a factor, but LeBron came out the gate playing very well. You know, Anthony Davis, the same cannot be said for him.
Yeah, and like I do think though that his struggles from 3-point range have hurt the Lakers more with the current roster that they've built than it probably should have. Like if they had actually built out a roster that had more two-way players, had more shooting in that starting lineup, you know, if Davis was struggling from three, you could just say, well, you know, pick and pop to the mid-range more or pick and roll. So I do think that the roster construction for the Lakers has sort of accentuated the struggles of Davis from three. But yeah, I mean, he's certainly similar to, you know, the last couple of guys, you know, Jarrett Allen or, you know, somebody like Chris Middleton or even James Harden. I think he's borderline. But yeah, I'm curious to get your take, Corbin, because would you put Anthony Edwards above Anthony Davis as the injury replacement? I would like to hear your case on that.
Well, I'll put Edwards above Davis, you said?
Yeah.
I would. Edwards has improved across the board. The Wolves, I think, are around at 500, barely over 500. But like, and I get why he shouldn't be just for that, but he has definitely improved. Definitely had his moments. Defensively, I think he's been a lot better. The Wolves have not been the bottom seller of the league, so there has been, you know, reason for joy there. And he's been more consistent. And I think your best availability is available. That's not the word. The best, I don't remember. The point is he's played poor and he's played a high enough level. And if you look at all of his numbers, has improved, especially across many of his advanced metrics, that I would definitely worry Anthony Edwards with a spot. I think that he's been a catalyst for success on the Timberwolves. The only issue kind of pushing me away from that is that in my mind, if you have two all-stars on your team, like you should be one of the upper echelon teams. You know what I mean? Because then most people are reasons why you're successful. And to have two representatives of the Timberwolves being given where they are, I don't know. But then again, I guess you say the same thing for the Lakers.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's context dependent, right? Like I think that the Raptors with Siakam and Van Fleet deserve two guys, but perhaps the reason they're not, you know, a great basketball team is because they have the worst bench in the NBA, right? It's like you can have two great players. Even I think the Boston Celtics have two top 30 or around two top 30 guys in Tatum and Brown, but they've somewhat struggled because I think the rest of the roster hasn't really contributed at a high enough level. So it's all context based. And yeah, Minnesota has played some decent basketball as of late. You know, Anthony Edwards shooting 36% on threes, but with 400 attempts, according to Cleaning the Glass, which, you know, excludes garbage time. Wow. So, you know, that's an impressive number. And yeah, he's been
very much so.
He's been better this year. He continues to improve. I think the next step for him, given his athleticism and his size and strength, is just being better finishing around the basket. But I could see that happening in the near future.
Very much so. I agree with you on that as well. I think that those are the things that come in time, and he is improving. And, you know, there'll be another year for him. Like, that's I'm not really losing. It's not like, I don't know, there's a Mike Conley situation. It's his second year. And the fact that he's already improved so much, like, that's great.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Were there anybody? Were there any other snubs that that maybe you had in your notes, Corbin, that you wanted to
So
talk about? Because I'm out as far as my list.
no, I am with you. I think another case could have been made on the East for a similar guy to Anthony Edwards and LaMelo Ball. The Hornets have been a lot of fun, been real cool up tempo. LaMelo Ball's been a big reason why, for the most part. He's had enough down games. I'm not totally against it, and there have been more deserving All-Stars, so I'm not really putting up too much of an argument for that. Another guy I liked, but he's missed just too much time for me, but I thought had been playing well for the most part, Brandon Ingram. But he was a deep. Like there'd have to be a few people injured for him to make the All-Star team. Again, it's the argument for that was, hey, only difference between him and Chris Middleton is the fact that he's playing on a worse team, and maybe shooting slightly worse because he's averaging the same like 22, 5 and 5. And I have like the fact that the Pelicans are a halfway decent basketball team when he's on the court, and they've been pretty rough when he's off. But unfortunately, he's had just enough bad games and just enough missed games as well that he slides off my list there too. But that's it for the All-Star snubs. I appreciate you kind of giving your feedback on that, Garrett. Very thoughtful on who could or could not be. And I think it's going to be interesting to see who the injury replacements are. Maybe we can circle back, and whether it's on Roundball Ramble or Duncan Dynasty, look back on that and, have a little bit of a chuckle as we reflect there. But before we go to breaking down the Blazers Clippers trade, I do need to remind y'all folks that we do have a brand new daily fantasy partner at Sports Ethos. The name is Thrive Fantasy. Prop up with Thrive Fantasy on their mobile app or at thrivefantasy.com. Use the code ETHOS, ETHOS, when you sign up to get a 100% deposit match bonus on your first deposit up to $100, plus either 2 or 4 free game tickets to play. Pick player props on the biggest names playing every night, score points on your props hit, and the players with the most points win a share of the nightly prize money. And check out our Sports Ethos DFS team or podcast for advice on winners. Again, that code is ETHOS over at thrivefantasy.com. Speaking of thriving teams, let's talk about the Los Angeles Clippers. Love that segue. Oh my gosh, I'm rolling here. Let's talk about Los Angeles Clippers and the Portland Trailblazers, who made a trade that I absolutely detested. I was apoplectic when it came out. I just did not understand it. I thought about some more. I still barely understand it. 5-player trade. Clippers acquired Norman Powell and Robert Covington from the Portland Trailblazers and sent out Eric Bledsoe, Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, and a 2025 second-round draft pick to Portland. Now, after we've recorded, or as we're recording right now, the Blazers did play a game. It was the debut of Justice Winslow. Keon Johnson did not play with an ankle injury, and Eric Bledsoe did not play with an Achilles injury, which everyone, including Law Murray on Twitter, found interesting because Eric Bledsoe has not had any injury reports all season or the game before he was traded. So it does look like maybe with the contract he has that he will be rerouted as Portland continues to do whatever the heck they're doing. But with that, I throw it over to you, Garrett. I already kind of dumped into my reaction to the trade on Twitter, on Instagram, and on this podcast. So I kind of want to get your take on what were you sensing from both sides? What was your initial reaction? And can you please justify Portland's behavior here?
Okay, I'll do my best.
I threw a lot at you there.
my initial reaction was that the Clippers won the trade, right?
Absolutely.
I think getting 2 guys in Norman Powell and Robert Covington should help the team for this year, in the event that, even if just Paul George comes back at some point, this team could be scary. I mean, we saw what the Clippers could do even without Kawhi, winning the last couple of games in that Utah series and making it really tough on Phoenix, going small, and acquiring a couple of guys in Powell that can play the 2 or the 3, and Covington that can play the 3 and the 4. That just gives them that much more roster flexibility for Ty Lue to be able to throw out all of those small ball lineups. Even Covington could probably play some small ball 5 as well for this team. So I really like it from that perspective. And then, also with Steve Ballmer as the owner, Norman Powell's contract, not the greatest contract in the world, but, if you've got an owner that's just willing to pay it, like Powell's a good player, he's just overpaid, right? So, or at least he'll be overpaid in years like 3 through 5 of this contract.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if you've got an owner that's willing to just foot that bill, why not bring him on? Because he's good and he'll help. So yeah, from that perspective, I like it from the Clippers. And they didn't give up much. They a second round pick, a guy in Keon Johnson who they just drafted in the first round, but a guy that I actually was really high on, but to realize that he's a bit of a project, and it's tough with a guy that raw to really find minutes on a team that's competing right now. So, not a ton to give up to get two quality starting players, and two guys that I think fit the Clippers system well. As far as the Blazers side of this, it's just a bet on Keon Johnson, really, is what this is.
Hell of a bet.
Yeah. Again, I was really high on him when I saw him, coming into the draft. 6'5" guard, amazing athlete, like elite athlete, Corbin. And he's very raw from a skill perspective. He needs to work on the jump shot. He needs to work on the ball handling. But I think he's a guy that is going to be a really good defensive player, given his size, I think he can defend twos or threes in the NBA. And, he's going to be a good transition player, given his speed and his verticality. So, it's just a matter of, can he develop that skill set? Can he, and really it probably starts just from, can he knock down spot up jumpers? And if he's able to do that, then that forces defenders to close out on him, and that opens up the dribble drive, attacking those closeouts. And I think he could become a really, really good player. And, the Blazers have committed to these sorts of guys in Anfernee Simons and Nasir Little. They've drafted these raw players that have some athleticism, and they trust their own development staff to build up the skill set to complement that athleticism. So, I think it's a reasonable bet, but yeah, you wonder if Keon Johnson doesn't pan out, this trade is just, probably an F on the grade.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, Johnson, the 21st overall pick, he's played just 15 games this season, averaging 3.5 points per game. From what I've listened to podcast wise and everything, it agrees exactly what you said, in terms of his athleticism being the best factor, but his jump shot, which was a question mark back then, still, I guess, apparently being somewhat of an issue, and just kind of growing in other facets of the game. So I have to ask you, given that you have watched a little bit, of course, of Keon Johnson, do you think that this was worth it? Because obviously the one thing we can all see is that they were trying to duck the tax, right? We all can tell that was the major goal of the Portland Trailblazers. And I think they'll continue to do that. We'll see some more moves by this front office, I think, come trade deadline, looking at, of course, expiring contract in Jusuf Nurkic, whatever else they may do. But being that they did this, and you look at the one guy who's going to factor into this team at all past next year, outside of, I guess, what everything adjusted Winslow being Keon Johnson, what do you think of that guy? Is he someone that you think will come and eventually have an Anfernee Simons type breakout? Is he worth this haul? Because yes, the main goal for the Blazers was financial, but you would have to hope that they thought of the return in some capacity.
Yeah, I'll mention, and this was something I heard on Dunked On Prime with Nate Duncan and Danny LaRue, but there's another factor that you have to consider from the Blazers' perspective, and that is just getting worse for this season to help their own 2022 draft pick. I mean, this trade definitely does that. With Damian Lillard out for a while, and the team kind of on the edge of that play-in race in the West. Like if they fall down and, just a few spots really in the standings, they could get to the point where they're maybe even fifth best lottery odds for the draft, which that could be very beneficial.
Wow.
So that's something to consider. And then, yeah, you're getting a second round pick. And then, yeah, you're getting Keon Johnson, and as you mentioned, you're ducking the tax. So there's a couple of factors that make it so that I don't think this is just an absolutely terrible trade for Portland. But yeah, a lot of it comes down to Keon Johnson and their ability to develop him. And it's really hard for me to sit here and predict if Keon Johnson is going to develop the skills, because that's very much just based on how much work he's willing to put in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, he's got the talent to become a pretty darn good player. And if you look at the guys, again, that Portland have drafted in Simons and Little, they did they did nothing really in their rookie year, neither of them. And even into their second year, it took them a while. It took them a year and a half to 2 years to really even start to show anything. And now I think most teams would consider those guys as positive trade assets and decent players, decent up and coming players. So, we'll have to wait and see if Johnson is in that mold or not. But I don't mind the bet. As I said at the beginning, I think that the Clippers won this trade, but I don't think it's as lopsided as, I think a lot of people are suggesting and what I initially thought when I first saw it.
No, I feel you on that. You know what? I may not necessarily agree. I still think the Blazers should have done better. I don't know if they should have packaged them together. I guess, and I think you mentioned I forgot which podcast it was that mentioned a point about maybe them prioritizing Keon Johnson as that prospect by, offering those two players both together. But I really feel you could have gotten maybe a couple seconds and, some salary flotsam for Robert Covington and then done something Norman Powell where, yes, that contract is expensive, but it's by no means a negative one. Like, he's had a great year, 18 points per game. 40% from three. Like, that is helpful to a title contender playoff team in general. You know what I mean? The back half of that contract, yeah, who knows? But like right now, it's been solid. So I get where you're coming from. You've made excellent points, better than I've had before. I just don't see how that is the best, but maybe I'm just a little more negative on it.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where I think like both Powell and Covington, I would probably say they both have like slightly positive value on their contracts given their age and everything. But yeah, with the two of them, do I think the two of them are worth a first round pick? That's debatable. I would say they're worth probably a little bit less than a first round pick. Now, if Portland was willing to take on some bad salary and also send those two, they might have been able to get first round value, but they weren't. They wanted to actually offload some salary. So,
that was their main point. Yeah.
So you're getting some value for offloading salary. You're getting a second round pick, and you're also getting Keon Johnson, who I think is at least worth a second round pick. And I assume the Blazers probably had him as a first round value and a guy that was high up on their individual board. So, I think value wise, it's relatively okay. It's just a matter of, that Keon Johnson. It's a lot to bet on one player who, has really up to this point, albeit it's early in his career, shown absolutely nothing.
You said it better. You said it best there. We'll have to see how it works out. Hopefully when he returns from the ankle injury, the Blazers will be one of those league pass teams that I'm addicted to watching because I like to see a good bad team. And I think Blazers have the capacity to really be that post trade deadline. But kind of branching away from this deal, we have the trade deadline coming in a couple of days. By the time listeners listen to this, maybe 2 or 3 days. What are we looking at? How are we feeling? Is there a team that you are anxious to make a move? Like, what are your general thoughts here? Let's kind of have a little dialogue on the upcoming trade deadline, what we think might happen, should happen, etc. here.
I'm interested in what the Cavs are going to do to fill out that other backcourt spot. They obviously lost Rubio. They traded for Rondo, but that seemed to be more of just a stopgap solution. So they still need, especially without Rubio and without Sexton, they need a guy that can play some at the two. I don't think you can go into a playoff series and expect Isaac Okoro to play 35 minutes at shooting guard. I just don't think that's feasible trying to win a playoff series at this stage. That's nothing against Isaac Okoro. He's just a very limited offensive player at this stage.
Of course. No. And that's there's no lie there.
But they've got multiple options, and the rumors that I've heard, which I'm kind of lukewarm on, but apparently the Cavs are interested in Karis LeVert, and I don't know how much that's based off of how LeVert and Jarrett Allen played when they were together in Brooklyn. They had a really good chemistry. But if you're talking about how Karis LeVert, if you're looking at Karis LeVert from how he's played this year, I don't think he's worth what the Pacers seem to want for him, which seems to be a first round pick.
No, I'm with you. I mean, he did explode for 42 points in his most recent game. So put some respect on Karis LeVert's name. I was kidding. But in general, yeah, I mean, 42 points, 5 rebounds, 8 assists. Like, when he's on. But like his jumper, he takes 5 threes a game, but he only shoots 32%. Like, it's enough to keep a defense honest, but like only just, you know? I think that he's someone that can be like a secondary ball handler, a secondary playmaker, just enough offensive ability off the dribble. I would like him in Cleveland potentially. I just don't know, like you said, the asking price is worth it. At the same time, I mean, you're looking at no, I don't think 18, 3, and 4. I'm just looking just at that base counting stat is worth a first because of the value given. Like, he needs shots to get to his points. You know what I mean? He's not efficient in that type of way where you give that guy, 7 scoring possessions and he'll end up with like 15, 20 points. I think the 42-point game he just had was the most efficient game in the last couple of games. He did 42 points on 26 possessions, or 19-26 rather. So I get you. I tend to go back and forth between how I look at Caris LeVert's trade value, but I do think he'd be a nice piece on Cleveland because he does bring some size. He does bring some potential scoring, shooting ability. Definitely brings a scoring. Can play on the ball. Can play off the ball and slash and attack. And I think he'd fit well within what Cleveland's trying to do. And you're right, having that great chemistry with Jared Allen might transfer over to Evan Mobley as well. And then you have additional size that you can use. I can see a Darius Garland, Caris LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen starting 5. That's pretty crazy,
Yeah, I like Caris LeVert in the role of like when as ball handler creator when Garland sits. I just don't love him as a fit next to Garland, in part because he's shooting 32% from 3, so he doesn't provide great floor spacing when Garland is handling. And then also he doesn't bring a ton defensively either, which you really kind of need next to Darius Garland, which is why, at least defensively, Isaac Okoro is a great fit in the backcourt with Garland. So, yes, you're obviously bringing in a guy that can help you on the offensive end, but I think he hurts you a bit defensively. And then also, you're talking about, I don't think he's a great fit with arguably the Cavs' best player and all-star in Darius Garland. So that is a bit of an issue. One other element of that, of a potential trade with the Pacers, though, that I like for Cleveland is they could potentially convince Indiana to throw in Justin Holiday, who I think would provide some much-needed depth for the Cavs on the wing.
That would be interesting. I think Justin Holiday, the only issue would be, he'd be fine with the COVID vaccination restrictions, right?
I believe so, yes.
Because he doesn't have it, but it probably would work there. Yeah, okay, well, I mean, as far as a player, there's no argument there. He definitely would be an immediate upgrade as far as a perfect 3-and-D guy, space the floor, slot in, defend multiple positions, fit in well with the Cavs' overall defensive scheme. I would agree with that completely.
But Holiday shooting 38% from 3, so I think he'd be a good fit. The thing that I really come back to, though, is if the Cavs are going to throw in a first-round pick, I think they should just be targeting someone, and you've got the matching salary and Ricky Rubio to trade for a mid-sized contract. They should be going after a bbigger fish.
I agree.
Just a better player than LeVert. And heck, if you can get a guy that's significantly better than LeVert and also it has a contract for multiple years, I'm not necessarily opposed to the Cavs throwing in multiple firsts to get a guy that they know helps them now and into the future. But I find the Cavs so fascinating here because with the Eastern Conference, those teams at the top kind of struggling for whatever reason and injuries and all of that, like it feels pretty wide open.
Yeah. I would agree with you. It definitely does have a kind of weird mix where you have the Bucks kind of languishing around. The Nets have been in the slump. The Raptors are rising. The Bulls at the top, but they've been dealing with some injuries of their own. I agree. Like it can definitely happen. I definitely think that some team, and the Cavs could be that one team in the Eastern Conference, could make a trade that immediately kind of vaults them into some surprise superiority.
Yeah, and honestly, if I can transition to the other conference,
let's do it.
The thing that fascinates me is just which Western Conference team, whether that's Phoenix, whether that's Golden State or Memphis or Dallas or Denver or the Lakers. We already saw the Clippers made a move, and maybe they still have another move or two before the deadline in them. But which of those teams feels like they're close enough to and are one piece away really like a Harrison Barnes or a Jeremy Grant away
Mm-hmm.
from truly competing and potentially winning the Western Conference. That to me is really fascinating because I could see 4 or 5 teams convincing themselves of that possibility.
No, I agree. And it's very much like the East, except a little more on steroids, I guess, in the sense that you have a bunch of teams kind of in that 4 through 8 range, some are trying to desperately avoid the playing tournament, cough, Lakers cough. Others are trying to kind of solidify themselves in the upper echelon of the West. And, you have other teams, even like maybe the Timberwolves, that are like, hey, we are right there in this thing. We are playing some decent 500 ball. If we just get one additional big or a little extra shooting or whatever the case may be, we can be right in the mix of this thing. So I completely agree. I guess one question I want to ask you before we close out here, what's one player that you're really looking forward to being moved?
To me, it's Harrison Barnes because for one, Sacramento's not going anywhere, and they've held on to him in past deadlines, even though I felt like they should have probably gotten rid of him. And he's the perfect guy that I think fits onto most teams. Like, even though I don't think he's like a perfect fit on the Lakers, given that LeBron is best at the 4 and Davis is best at the 5, like he's an upgrade on any 3 the Lakers have. If you want to put him out of position even a little bit, he's still a better 3 than Trevor Ariza, for instance.
Yeah, no, he was definitely. Yeah, I get you on that.
So, I think he could help a lot of teams. I think he could help Dallas pretty significantly. I think he could.
That's ironic.
Yeah. I frankly, I think he could help Golden State, going back to Golden State.
That's even more, but yeah, I agree.
Help them quite a bit. So he's a guy that I could see a number of teams being interested in, and quality player that can defend multiple positions. He's strong enough to play 4 in a small ball lineup that a lot of these teams are going to want to go to. So yeah, and he's having arguably the best offensive season of his career, getting to the free throw line a bunch, knocking down threes. He's got the off the bounce game. So he's a perfect plug and play player that every team needs. And Memphis, I think he'd be a great fit at Memphis.
Oh my gosh, yeah,
grab him too. So
he would. I guess my one player would be Jeremy Grant. I just would like to see him on a team where I'm getting some heavy kind of Aaron Aflalo vibes with him. And remember Aaron Aflalo a couple of years ago, kind of a 3-and-D player for the Denver Nuggets, went to Orlando, became the main guy on a team that sucked. He was getting all the shots he wanted, everything he wanted there, but the team was pretty trash, right? Then he went from that to the Portland Trailblazers, and I think he struggled to kind of adjust to the type of player that he was, because he really wasn't that player. He's really at best a third option, but he was able to eat whatever he wanted, on a bad team. And it's reassimilating yourself to a better team where the options therefore are better than you. And you know what? Alfalo never did kind of find his way in that. He never really did become that player, and didn't really matter because his whole kind of bottom fell out in terms of his career trajectory, and then he was at the league in a couple of years. In fact, he ended his career again in Orlando. But with Jeremy Graham, seeing a guy who, at least if the rumors are to be true, that he wants to go to a team that, one, he gets an extension, but 2, can still get like a healthy portion of the offense. And I just don't look at Jeremy Grant as that guy. I mean, we saw him do it in Detroit, and it didn't end very well for Detroit. So, like, for an actual team with any legitimate designs for winning significantly, Jeremy Grant, I don't think, can be your number 1 or number 2 player. I mean, his career average of 22 points per game came on 42% from the field, on a true shooting. If I remember, I'm looking it up right now just to get it, on a true shooting of quick time here, 55%, which isn't bad, but it's definitely not super great. And that was on a Pistons team that was in the cellar. You know what I mean? They got the number 1 pick for a reason. So, like, I think Jeremy Grant, if he is able to play within himself right now over this season, he's averaging 19 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 2.5 assists, shooting a 3 ball, okay, 34%. That's kind of around his career mark, but definitely a dip over the past 2 seasons from his 39 and 38% clips respectively in OKC and Denver in that 2018-2019 and then 2019-2020 season. So if you're able to get into a spot where you can just stick to those spot threes, play a little bit off the bounce in terms of the closeout, since you do have that newfound skill to kind of get to the basket, play good defense, be that help defender, swing between the 3, the 4, and even the 5, and also be able to defer to better offensive talents on your team. I think you make a significant upgrade to Eastern or Western Conference contending team. And so I really want to see a move made for Jeremy Grant, especially when they give Detroit some younger guys to grow along with Cade Cunningham, Killian Hayes, Deke Bay, and all those guys there as well. But
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I think Jeremy Grant is fascinating because the role he was on in Denver is the perfect role for him if you're trying to maximize his ability to contribute on a championship team. But now I don't even know if he would be a great fit on Denver, given they've got a guy in Aaron Gordon who essentially replaced him.
exactly.
I also don't think he would be a great fit with the Lakers, given that I think they just need to add a guy that is a legit 3-point shooter that also can defend. I mean, that's why I think Harrison Barnes would be a good fit for the Lakers. So the amount of teams that I think Harrison Barnes can fit on is larger than for Grant. But the one team, and I mentioned this when we did our sort of our fake trade episode on Duncan Dynasty, the one team that I think would be an interesting fit for Jeremy Grant is the Dallas Mavericks. I think that could, sort of the perfect meld of talent. They need a little bit more athleticism. They need that guy that they've put Maxi Kleba to guard the guys like Kawhi Leonard or whatever. And I think they just need another guy that can do that sort of thing and just bring a little bit more athleticism to that team.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that fit would actually be really interesting. So definitely something to kind of keep an eye on for, hopefully in a move that could be made. So we'll definitely see. But my final question before I let you go, Garrett, 2 words, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Ben Simmons.
I mean, I know people like just want this saga to end, and I do too, but I don't see it happening. I think I saw a tweet today that was something to the effect of the Sixers, don't want to attach any assets in a Ben Simmons for James Harden trade because James Harden is disgruntled. Well, what's Ben Simmons then? If James Harden is disgruntled,
exactly.
what's the word that's more powerful than disgruntled? Because that's what Ben Simmons is. So,
you said it.
Every rumor that I've heard coming out of the Philadelphia camp is just them being completely oblivious to the actual value of Ben Simmons. They just seem to be in a different universe as far as what his value is. So I don't see a deal happening. I think Ben Simmons is going to stay on the roster, and Daryl Morey is going to take the risk of wasting a year of Joel Embiid's prime and go into the offseason and potentially make a move then. But who knows? It might not even happen for another. But, we could be talking about this at the next trade deadline.
I really hope not for our sanity. I mean, mine specifically, Garrett, but I just want to see a move be made. I do think that, you do get a guy like Joel Embiid playing the way that he is, tied with LeBron James this season in scoring, definitely among the leaders in the MVP. And yes, you have a team that definitely fits around them, but you can get a couple upgrades as well for Ben Simmons. Just do that. Like, stop trying to go for this big fish that isn't there. You know what I mean? And guess what? If he's not playing and the further goes down, I mean, then you're going to be trying to trade the idea of Ben Simmons over the actual production of him, So I just don't see it. I hope something gets made, but unfortunately, I am more on your side in the sense that I don't see that happening. So we will definitely see kind of where that goes. But Garrett, thank you, man, for giving me some of your time. It's always a pleasure when we talk. I value our conversations. I have a lot of fun with them. And I just thank you for the time.
Absolutely, man. It was a blast. And I'm just a phone call away. I'll come on whenever you want me, Corbin.
I appreciate you, man. Y'all, listen, make sure to try Garrett Bugay. This guy's a talented brother. Happy to say a good friend of mine, but we're not just talking about basketball, of which he's definitely big on that. We're also talking about just, again, film, TV, kind of a 2-hour, 3-hour pod on video games on Duncan Dynasty, which I'm happy to be a co-host of. So check that out. Duncan Dynasty, wherever you find podcasts. Check out Garrett Bugay on Twitter at Garrett Bugay, GarrettBugay. Definitely make sure to do that, y'all. You will not regret it. You'll be better for it. I am telling you 100%. Speaking of that, you can follow me on Twitter if you are so inclined. Corbin NBA, that's where it is. CORBAN NBA. Pretty simple, nothing to it outside of that. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Roundball Ramble. Let me know how I'm doing, how I can make it better. I really would like to do that, and I can only do it with your help. Sports Ethos presentation, you know what to do. Sports Ethos on Twitter, also online, sportsethos.com. And then quickly, before we sign off, I want to remind you all to use coupon code HoopBall20 at manscaped.com for 20% off your order and free shipping. Also, check out our pals at mybookie.ag. Use the code HoopBall on the third page of sign up to unlock deposit match bonuses there as well. That's HoopBall20 HOOPBALL20. Yes, I know where Sport the Ethos is changing. But all that being said, for Garrett, for myself, we are Frosty. Y'all stay frosty, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow. All right, y'all.